In this video, we're going to complete the square, right? And the idea of completing the square is so that we can get to this vertex form. This vertex form gives us some information that allows us, for example, to graph a quadratic. It gives us the vertex, right, which is why it's called the vertex form. And then from there, we can also get the x-intercepts and things like that, the y-intercept, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just a method that's used to be able to graph a function. And there's various methods. You could graph a function using quadratic formula, right, factoring, all that stuff. And so this is just something that allows you to get certain things from quadratic in standard form that's converted to vertex form. Because standard form, it's so hard to get anything out of except for like y-intercept where you plug in 0. Okay, so here we go. In this particular case, I'm going to help you complete the square to get to vertex form, but it's for when a is equal to 1. Okay, so if you look at here, a is equal to 1. So if a was 3, for example, this process here would look a little different. So if I need to, I'll make a different video, but there's a lot of videos out there where you're doing completing the square and this is like 2 or -4, right? This requires you to actually factor out the a. And this is one of the easier ones, right? When you don't have to worry about the a because a is just 1. All right, so I already pre-wrote the steps so that it saves us some time. And let's go from there. So one of the first things you want to do is set your function equal to 0. So that's what we did here. And then the second step is move the constant, right, to the right side of the equation. All right, move the constant to the right side of the equation. So we need to move this over here. We do that by subtracting 15 to both sides. So it's negative 8x plus, oh, x. Come on, get your life. Negative 8x plus, now I'm setting myself for the next step here, okay? And I'll show you in just a second. This next step is going to involve completing the square, right? So, again, just to reiterate, this looks a little different because a is equal to 1. So if a was not equal to 1, normally I write something like complete the square here, multiply by the a. But that's not what we're doing because a is just 1, so it doesn't really change anything. So this is the completing the square part. So now we complete the square. In order to complete the square, the reason I wrote standard form is because it's always important when you're using formulas like quadratic formula and this formula to know what a and b and c is and where they're located, right? They're always like this. And by the way, a, b, and c are not numbers. So if you're asked to put b divided by 2, please, b is not bx. Okay, b is just the number that's in front of x. All right, so let's proceed. So here we have b divided by 2, and when you're starting, I would recommend always using letters first. So b divided by 2 squared. And then here we have negative 8 divided by 2 squared. And remember, anything squared is positive. That's going to be negative 4 squared, which is just 16. Okay, so we add 16 to both sides. All right, and that's kind of like the gist of completing the square. Beyond this point, we're just basically going to be manipulating things so that we get back to the actual vertex form here. Okay, so usually what I tell people is you can already set some of these things that are very predetermined. So for example, here to go from this line to the next one, we can already write x and then the parentheses squared. Okay, and we can already kind of technically move this back over here, but we're gonna wait. So let's talk about what goes in here. Whoa. Let's talk about what goes in here. So in here is always going to be b divided by 2. So here we have, I'm kind of on a tight space here. So b divided by 2, which ends up being negative 8 divided by 2, which ends up being negative 4. So everything's like patterns, right? So this you already had computed. It's actually whatever number you end up getting in this parentheses before you square it. That saves you from doing all this extra work. So the number in here should be -4, okay? Equals, and then on the right-hand side, it's -15 plus 16, which is +1. Now, you have to practice good manners. This is not a good place to leave it, right? You want to get it to be in this form. So let's just start with that. So it's f of x, okay, equals x minus 4 squared. And remember, we need to move this one back over here. So we do that by subtracting 1 to both sides. So we end up with -1. So this ends up being your function in vertex form, okay? The other thing that I kind of missed out here was the a. Like, what happened with this a? But remember, this is why this is the easy example, because a is always 1 in these types of examples. Once a is not 1, let's just say again 3, that's where things start to change. You're going to need to factor 3 out first. Again, that's so it's enough. It's different enough to make a different video for it, you know? So we're not going to do that here. Okay, but because it's just 1, we don't need to always put 1, right? Please don't do that. It just doesn't even look nice. Okay, with that being said, we got the vertex form. So like I said, from here we can get the vertex. So the vertex is 4. It's always the opposite of in there of what's inside the parentheses, right? So 4, comma, and then what's outside, which is -1. So you always take the opposite of this, but normally this, or always this, you write it as the value that it is. And then axis of symmetry, you can already get from that, which is just the x of the vertex. So axis of symmetry is x equals 4. And then you can, like I said, get the, we're not going to do this in this video, but you can get the y, the factors, I'm sorry, not the factors. You can get the intercepts, the y and the x. Remember that y-intercept is always the easiest one. You plug in 0, so that's like 0 minus 4 squared minus 1. If you do that, your value is going to be 0, comma, whatever you get from doing the math. And then the other one, which is x-intercepts, it's always get your function and set it equal to 0, okay? Well, I kind of messed that up right there. It's your function equal to 0. Okay, and then you add 1 to both sides, right? You get x minus 4 squared equals 1. And then you square root both sides, right? And then you start solving there. Okay, I'm not going to do that in this video. I've done enough examples in class. All right, the other thing I wanted to share with you is somebody helped trigger a connection between just finding the vertex, right? Using the trick that we figured out in class to find the vertex to help us get here faster. So check this out. The trick was, right, to find the vertex. Okay, I'm going to use short notation here, V for vertex. It's -b over 2a, comma, and then plug that into your function. So it's function -b over 2a, okay, and then you plug that in, right? So let's try that out. So to get the x, right, because that's the x value here, okay, it's -b over 2a. Careful, right, because b itself is negative. So negative 8, because the b is negative, all over 2 times a is 1. So that's 8 divided by 2. So x is 4, right? So x is 4. So now we have the x of the vertex. Now we plug 4 in so we can find out what y is. So let's plug that into the equation. So it's f of 4 and then 4 squared minus 8 times 4 plus 15. Hopefully my algebra works out. Okay, so what do we get? So here it's 16. Okay, so 16 minus 32 plus 15. Okay? 16 minus 32, that's half of that, right? Because 16 is half of 32. So if we do the math just there, that's -16 plus 15. Okay, once again, this yielded -16 and then plus 15. That's going to give us 1. So check that out. If you're very comfortable with this formula and finding the vertex this way, you can put the pieces of the puzzle together. You can put this with this and you come up with the vertex form much easier. Man, was I surprised when I just connected the dots. I've been doing math for years, man, and that just never crossed my mind. Remember, a is 1, so then if we do x And then remember to go back into the vertex form, you go opposite, right? Because you had to go opposite to go to here. So if you want to go back to vertex form, you have to use the opposite sign. So it's -4 squared. And then I was like, wait, the 1 didn't match up. It was negative here and it's positive here. I just realized something, right? Where I messed up the algebra. Look at that. -16 plus 15 is not 1. It's -1. All right, so that should be -1. All right, good. That was a fast catch. All right, then that goes out here, so that's -1. And there you go. That's a fast way to get to here. But I know some of you might be looking, well, why don't I just do that? Well, that requires you to really, really understand this, right? If you are not that good at using this form, right, then you're going to struggle because this is a shortcut. There's no way to check your stuff, your work, right? To be confident on this alone, I don't know if that's going to happen on the test. So I would just learn both ways and then just go from there, okay? So yeah, that's this video right here.